My biggest takeaway podcast.
All right. First of all, man, thank you so much for calling on, brother. I appreciate your time and energy here. I know that you're a busy schedule, got a lot of clients. So, the reason I wanted to bring you on today, first and foremost, is because I think you have a very unique approach to what you do. And I know that you work with a lot of people who also see that as well. And being in your space, obviously, I think you work with a lot of people in the bodybuilding space. Obviously, that's near and dear to me as somebody who used to compete, now double retired. And so I want to dive more into, I think, your mission, what it is you're trying to accomplish, who you're trying to help. So, first of all, again, thank you so much, man.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. Been working with you for quite a bit now, getting to know you and your team, and y'all have helped out tremendously with what I do within my career, and just learning off of you and things that you've accomplished over your course and your career has been super helpful to me. So thanks for having me on.
I appreciate that, brother. So, you're in Houston, right?
Yeah, Houston, Texas, living here for I think coming up on 8 years now, so it's been a while.
Okay. What brought you to Houston?
So, funny enough, I kind of actually lived all over the world growing up. Born in the East Coast, lived over there for a little bit. Lived in Singapore for quite some
Really?
time. Yeah, 4 years. That was an experience. Would love to go back. And then Dallas and Houston. Just my dad's job, kind of growing up, moving around.
Okay.
We resided in Houston back when I started high school, and then I went away to college, and then after that I came back. So, hanging
Okay.
out, seeing some family. It's nice to be down here, close to everybody.
At what age did you live in Singapore?
7 years old to 11. So I was young, but I remember pretty much most of it. It's changed a lot since I've been there. But yeah, it's definitely it's like New York on crazy steroids is like what I say. It's insane.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And that's pretty wild to think because I lived, just outside Manhattan and it's a whole nother animal. So I can only imagine, you get into those other countries where it's just like a whole nother level of like actual population.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%.
So, dude, what got you into competing? Because I know you used to play baseball, right?
Yeah. So I played ball in college for 4 years. Funny enough, I actually started playing baseball in Singapore, which
Okay.
is a popular sport. I don't know what made me pick it up there, but did that. And, long story short, played in college for 4 years. And when I was in college, that's kind of where, I really got into like training and fitness and
Mhm.
more so, that bodybuilding lifestyle, which is difficult because we were playing sports. And that's, like your full time job when you're in college, 8 hour
Right.
practice every day is
What
not something.
position did you play?
I was a pitcher. So I
Okay.
pitched.
Same.
Yeah.
What's
Hmm.
your go to pitch?
Didn't throw too hard, but I had a good cutter.
Okay. All
Yeah.
right.
That got
It's
me
funny.
some.
So I had like the speed as like the bigger and stronger kid growing up. And then whenever all you got is heat, eventually everybody catches up to that. And so
Yeah.
I didn't work on the curve, the cutter. And so by the time I got to probably my senior year, I had good accuracy from throwing the fastball just so much, but eventually I just got to where I couldn't I wasn't dynamic enough with my pitching or my pitches to I guess be super successful at it, even though like I think they're like 84, 85 is the fastest I got clock, but
Yeah.
it to somebody that's good, that's perfect. Perfect speed.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
So what was I cuz I had the same thing, right? Played baseball, got into weightlifting, and then I got injured actually. And I was able to like focus and that's when I fell in love with working out because I was able to go do my own workouts, not the team's workouts. And my uncle who competed really got me into it. So then I started like working out in its own regiment and like I didn't even care to go back and play because I loved lifting so much, which I think is kind of funny because I spent my entire life trying to become the best baseball player and go D1 or play anywhere really. Um, but what made that big transition from you from going from like baseball into that lifting world?
So, back when I got into college, I actually had a roommate my freshman year who was more so into that side of stuff. He would watch those guys on YouTube and was more educated than I was in the sport of bodybuilding. And so, When we got there, I started working out when I was like 16 with, the baseball training and stuff.
Mhm.
And then when I got to college, it was like, all right, you got to get bigger. You got to put on some size. And so started hanging out with him, and we would all go work out in the gym together. He started showing me more about bodybuilding, more guys online, things like that. And from there, I kind of became obsessed with it, and I started doing more research on my own. And over time became, I would say, decently educated in it when I was going through college those first couple years. And after that, just kind of became that lifestyle, right? So I would go to the team workouts, I would go to the practice, and then I would do my own workout pretty much every day. I mean, it got pretty crazy. And then I ended up running my first prep when I was a senior in college.
Okay.
Yeah.
I got to ask, because we're a little different age. How old are you?
23.
23, right? So I'm 34. We grew up in different eras.
Yeah.
Who did you look up to?
In
Bodybuilding.
bodybuilding, a lot of guys. I think when I got older, I started getting exposed to more people, like bigger competitors in the sport. More of like the new era guys. So Chris Bumstead was a big influence for me. Rough Diesel was a big influence for me.
Yeah.
Terrence Ruffin. I did a lot of posing for a while. Rachel Daniels was a big influence for me. More people that now I can say that I've thankfully been able to meet where I'm at now were really big influences for me when I was coming up. And that's more of like who's in the sport now. Also, of course, Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? I mean, I feel like that's everybody.
Okay.
Yeah.
I never really like looked to Arnold in that way. I was like hard nosed. So like I had like the DVDs of like Branch Warren, Johnny Jackson, Ronnie Coleman,
Ronnie
like
Coleman. Yeah.
that hardcore Texas style, just no frills, hardcore training.
Mhm.
Because classic wasn't a thing, physique wasn't a thing. It was just mass and graininess is what pushed and drove me, right? It wasn't about the aesthetic. It was just like the awe, and that was the allure to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
No, you gotta be big.
yeah, yeah. So that's what pushed me, and I think it's great how the sport has evolved over time, so that really it's more inclusive, I believe, for different body shapes, different heights, different styles. You don't have to be the mass monster anymore to compete, at least try to place at least. It was focused now. I feel like a lot of it's on shape and conditioning more so than just that, mass monster. Because when I was competing, man, my first show I did in '09, and as a teenager, and man, we would have it to where the biggest guy won, and not the guy that had the most conditioning. And I think that somebody put it to me very well, and I was like, that makes sense. He said, this is bodybuilding, not body cutting. And I was like, I can see that, right? It takes more time to build the muscle than it does to lose the fat. But so they would give it to the guy I think that had more potential in going places than the guy that just showed up the leanest, because he might be 170 pounds string bean, but super shredded. And they'd give it to the guy who you could just tell had more experience in actual the bodybuilding side of it.
Right.
So, but what drew you into, I think, the bodybuilding and wanting to help other people do that?
So I done my first show, and I did this through college baseball season, which I don't recommend to anybody. I always say that.
Yeah, I was going to. That's not a good combo.
No, because I mean, when I was a senior, I got my degree in kines, so we had to get an internship to graduate. So my schedule was brutal. I was doing content creation. I had a coaching business at the time as well, so it was like wake up, internship. After that, it was class from 9 to 12. After that, you had a 2 hour break. That was when I did work, and then yeah, 2 hours a day. It's crazy to look back on that now. And then from 2 till anywhere from 8 to 10 p.m. if we scrimmage, we would do practice. So 6 to 8 hours a day. After that, I was going to the gym, doing the cardio if I had to do it, following all the meals, being like bring them to practice. It was brutal. So I think that being so locked in with that schedule of like, okay, I have a date that I have to be, essentially shredded by, really kind of like shifted the mindset of like, okay, I learned a lot about myself, that I can juggle a lot of things at once. and do really well at it. And then it became more so like an obsession for me, to the point where it was like, you do your first show, and then you have all this drive. You're like, I can't wait to do another one, right after that. And so that obviously, of course, became the goal. And right after I had gotten off that first that first show, and I got off stage, it was like a week after, I had people applying to work with me for bodybuilding coaching, which was new for me. I hadn't done it yet before.
Yeah.
But the education that I had done a lot with competing myself, I had a coach, kind of had to coach half myself through that too. It made me feel like I was like, you know what, I'm going to jump into it. And I'll figure it out. And so I remember buying the complete guide to contest prep at that time and reading through all that and coaching this guy into a show, and he looked extremely well. And then from there, just more opportunities kind of presented themselves to coach other competitors.
Mm-hmm.
Every single time I was like, I'm going to jump into it. I'm not going to let this opportunity, slip underneath, like right underneath me. And that, I think, propelled me to coaching more people over time, where it's now people know me as like the bodybuilding. Like that's what they think when they see, our brand and stuff.
Dude, I gotta tell you, for a young cat, I've seen the guys you've posted about and step on stage. Dude, you got some good looking people, man. Like they are shredded and dialed in. And I feel like the hardest piece isn't losing the weight, it's peaking. It's showing up like on game day, because I mean that was my biggest struggle. I would look great 3 days out. By the time I show up to the show, I just worry myself or mess with my water and show up and I'm just flat as a pancake, or just don't have it like I did 3 days prior. And it's like, just spent the last 20 weeks for nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Dude, you've got some skill, you've got some talent. I've seen some guys show up and you've got some hardware taken, right? We just had a guy compete at summer shredding, right?
Mm-hmm. We had 3 that we had prepped for the show, and then we had one who we had worked with as posing for the show, and then a couple guys like hands on, hands off. So it's like whenever I go to that show, especially that show specifically, a lot of people always come up to me, "Hey, can you help me with my posing?" Sure. So there's a lot of guys I'll work with backstage who are coached by other coaches. And
how important do you think posing is in the sport?
Well, from somebody who has to go to a lot of shows and sees a lot of guys lose because their posing is pretty bad, it's pretty important. I've had clients of mine beat other people my clients were smaller and less conditioned, but the guy, like, if you looked at his posing, you'd be like, wow, like, to be honest, like, that's just atrocious. And it's unfortunate because they could have put in the work to get it done, and they didn't know, but it ends up becoming a really big factor in if you want to place well and win a show, because I don't think anybody wants to go through a long hard diet to go to these extremes that other people can't even fathom, to not even place in a show because your posing wasn't there.
Yeah, I had somebody tell me when I was really young in the sport, they said posing is not about showing your attributes, it's about hiding your weaknesses.
Yeah.
What do you think about that statement?
I agree. So everyone has different physiques. Everybody's shaped differently. So let's just give a random example. Let's just say your shoulder is small, right? And your arm is huge, right? Or your arm overpowers your shoulder, makes your shoulder look small. When you hit a side chest, of course, they're going to be looking more at your chest, but that is obviously displayed. And there's certain ways that you can make your bicep pop less and make your shoulder pop more to even out and get the symmetry that you need on your physique. Same thing with waist angle. So I was literally about to put up a video today about talking about how to show off erectors and things like that. And if you're from a judge's point of view, a lot of people don't understand that judges are going to typically be below you, and they're going to be looking up at you, and whatever's closest to the eye is going to create that illusion of what's bigger or smaller. So if you're doing like a classic physique front relax pose, or even any pose from the front, even in men's physique, right? If you can draw your waist further away from the judges and get your lats and your chest closer to them by simply just pulling that waist back and leaning over, you're going to appear much smaller waist and way bigger than you essentially are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the art of the presentation of it and being able to accentuate what you want, hide what you want, really makes the difference of when I see you standing off stage relaxed, normal, and then when I see you on stage, you look completely different. That's the really cool piece about bodybuilding, is that, because it's funny, because typically you see a guy He's wearing a baggy shirt, and you'd be like, "Oh, that guy, he just looks normal." And then when he gets on stage, you're like, "That guy looks huge." That to me is the coolest and also the craziest part about the sport in general. Um, but for you as a competitor competing yourself, do you enjoy the journey to getting on stage or being on stage the most?
I think for me, I think it's being on stage because I'm really into that art of the posing, and the presentation, and showcasing what you've accomplished. The unfortunate part about it is that it's not that long, so you really gotta soak in the moment. Now, the journey to the stage, I feel like I've done two preps myself, and I feel like both times I went through them, I learned different things about myself that
Mm-hmm.
helped me in other areas of life. Now, of course, it's hard. Like, it's not easy, especially towards the end of it. But I think going through the journey, they a lot of bodybuilders will say, if you say it's going to suck, it's going to suck, which is true, right?
Yes.
Now, you can also tell yourself it's rainbows and butterflies, and like it's still not at the end of the day. So you just kind of have to go through it. But when you look back on it, I feel like I appreciate the journey a whole lot.
What was your biggest takeaway from each show?
First show, I think, was what I can, like, the workload that I can put on myself. I think was a really big positive. So my whole life has always been go go go.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, Even playing baseball in college, like, I remember my mom would drive me to these practices across town and back and forth, and I would sleep in the car, because then I'd be coming home super late doing homework, training, stuff like that, and it was a lot. But at the time, you don't think it's a lot. And
Sure.
then I go to college, and that's amplified times 10. And then when I hop on a prep, that's amplified even more. So I think that show, the biggest positive was I learned what I can do. Um, Also, like, trusting my gut too, with things that I can accomplish through that. And just, having, like, I think I developed a lot of confidence through that too. Um, the negative that came from the first show was, I think, controlling emotions. So I have a lot of conversations with competitors where, maybe this has happened to you when you went through a prep where it gets really difficult, and you're cranky, essentially. You're hungry, you're starving, right? You feel like you are. And the thing that I had to learn is, like, my friends, like family, they didn't ask for me to be on that prep. So there's no reason why that should affect them in any sort of way. So I think that was, something negative that turned into a positive. I think that definitely, like, affected my relationships at the time. But I ended up learning through that, which essentially light at the end of the tunnel there. The second prep that I did this time, it was back in August I competed, and this is back when I started working with you guys.
Mm-hmm.
And you remember all the inflow we were doing back then. It was really, really hard to manage. And
Yeah.
so this time around, I think that I learned essentially how to not just worry about yourself, but worry about 100 other people at the same time, which I think ended up becoming a pretty big positive, because it's the same thing with workload. But it taught me at the same time, like, I can't just be self-concerned. Like, I have other people, I have other responsibilities. Like, people rely on me, right? If I don't show up, then it affects everybody else. It affects my clients, it affects my employees, it affects my relationship, right? So, essentially, like, no matter how hard things get, is what I learned this past time, that, like, you got to continue to show up.
That's right. I
Yeah.
think that bodybuilding teaches that fortitude, and whenever you need it inside that fraction of your life, I can relate to some of that so heavily. Um, Somebody that's done 13 shows, I think the biggest pieces that I learned throughout them is that I'm capable of more than I thought. It's a choice, and not doing something because of my situation is not somebody else's fault. So, which brings me to a next, probably a funny question here. What's the strangest thing you've had to do with your food with in prep, but also having to do social events or family events?
Ooh, okay, so first time I excluded myself from just about everything. I remember that time, I think, so it's funny is that I didn't have, like, the best coach to that, so I actually learned, like,
Mhm.
what not to do, which is great. It ended up being a good thing. But that time I remember I would have like when my friends would or my teammates would have pizza or my roommates, I'd be like, no, 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 like eat that like here so I can smell it. So that was something weird. And then I would kind of exclude myself from other like social events. So I was kind of a hermit the first time.
Yeah.
The second time around, didn't do that at all. I think the second time it wasn't too bad. I honestly just like was able to manage things a lot better. So just like coming prepared for the next day like sets you up for success.
Yep.
So that was something that helped me out a lot. But I don't think second time was anything too crazy, too weird. You know, just essentially prepping my food, and somebody looks at me and they're kind of like they just don't get it. But
Yeah.
I mean, first
I
time.
remember two things that stand out to me that I remember. Um, my brother graduated high school and we went out to eat, and I brought my Rubbermaid container meal to the nice Italian dinner. Of course, your family's just like, "What are you doing?" I'm like,
Yeah,
"I'm reaching a goal."
yeah. They don't
And
get it.
as
It's
a guy that
funny.
grew up in Alabama, like that just didn't understand it until I did my first show, and then my dad was like, "Okay, I understand now."
Yeah,
Like once you see me on stage, then you get it. Because like my family never saw me pose until I was on stage tan. Which is a kind of an odd thing to like. I have no idea what I'm showing up for, but here I'm here to support my son.
yeah,
Another one was I was 21. Me and my brother bought a boat, and I was prepping because I always prep during the summer, right? Because I competed like I never competed later than August, so my summers and springs were always just prepped out throughout college from 19 to 23, basically every year. And I remember bringing out cold tilapia, broccoli, and rice. Everyone else is drinking, and I'm just sitting here, just like eating this food. I'm shredded, look great,
yeah,
but I just remember eating it, and everybody's like, "Ooh, what are you? You want a Bud Light to go with that?" And I was like, "No, I appreciate it though." Um, and then I also remember like going out on a Friday night with my buddies, like pulling out a piece of chicken breast out of my pocket and just eating it in the club out of a bag. Just
yeah.
like the craziest stories. But you want to talk about like discipline that sets you up for other areas in your life. If you can control what you eat, I'm a firm believer that you can do anything.
Yeah, you get more sustained energy. Like you know how it feels, if whenever you're on prep, I would say before you get to super, I would say typically it's low food, right? Um, you like whenever you start a prep, it's the beginning. You start feeling like kind of good. You're losing weight. You're honestly kind of getting stronger.
Mm-hmm.
You're eating clean. Your gut feels good. You just have a ton of energy, and I think that is how would be like more the healthy lifestyle for the average person.
I would think between that like 12 to 8 week mark is like
Mhm.
you're the prime human being at that point.
Yeah, and usually you look pretty good at that point anyways, right?
Absolutely. You definitely got abs.
Yeah. So I think when you control what you eat in that kind of aspect, you have more energy and you can I honestly think it relates to whatever your job is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Workload, anything like you are more accomplished at the end of the day opposed to like you go out you get a big meal, you get some dessert, you get some appetizers, and you come back and you're just like you're laying down, you don't want to do nothing.
Yeah. I think a lot of people that have never done a show do not understand what consistency does for your body.
Yeah.
When I mean consistency, I mean sleep schedule, routine, and I think the biggest one, the size of your meal. Because when you have like different sized meals because you eat out or this or that or whatever, and friends and here, where, whatever, the inconsistency of the body, it has to adapt and make those changes. But dude, when it's just like a machine, dude, it's like night or day difference on how you feel, your attitude, your emotions, everything.
Right.
What's your biggest piece of advice for somebody that's looking to do their first show?
First thing I would say is get a coach if it's your first show, no matter who that coach is. Second thing I would say is um, communicating with your coach is pretty big. A lot of people will get with a coach, and then we get a lot of clients from poor experience with other coaches, and I ask
Mhm.
them all the time, "Well, did you tell your coach this?" And they're like, "No." I'm like, "Well, I mean, you got to have some level of communication here." So
Mhm.
communicating with your coach is huge. I think it also relies on the coach as well. But essentially, just get a coach, right? And then practice your posing. Like, trust what your coach says, even if your coach is terrible and you know that, then get a new coach. But at the end of the day, trust what he says because he's going to be making updates, or she, based on what they think you're following. And then, second of all, if they don't do posing, get a posing coach.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I agree with all of that. I think probably one of the biggest mistakes newbies make too. I think this just goes for like hiring a coach in any facet is brutal honesty. If you had, you know, 2 scoops of peanut butter that you shouldn't have, like you got to own that because your coach is going to make adjustments to your body is not responding. And if it's because you had, more food than you were supposed to, he's going to cut your calories. And now you're in a worse situation where you're even hungrier because you just didn't tell the truth.
Exactly.
So I think just brutal honesty and owning whether you had a good day or a bad day or a good week or a bad week is going to lead to the end results of being optimal. Because if you start to lie at 12 weeks out, by the end of it, you're going to, what you tell your coach is going to be so far from what it is that he's telling you to do.
Exactly.
Because it starts to just snowball of these little lies. And all of a sudden, before you know it, your macros of what you're actually supposed to be eating are going to be 50 grams of carbs difference.
It's a lot.
So, yeah, for sure. And I learned that because my uncle, who was doing a show at the time, he's like, yeah, man. He's like, I'll have some peanut butter whenever I'm like starving. And I'm like, you cheat? I'm like, I don't cheat at all.
Yeah.
I just suck it up. Of course, he's looking at, he's in his late 30s, 2 kids, cop, like way more responsibility and things. For me, like, this is everything. This is all I got. I'm just my heart and soul into it versus like, I'm trying to go pro. He's like, I'm trying to do a show. So I think that your mentality of where you're at. What's like the average age of somebody you work with?
Oof, it's kind of all over, to be honest with you. I would say if we were to niche it down to an average, I would say 21 to 20 to 32. Honestly, 21 to 32 is like in that range. We do coach, more elderly too, who are 50 plus, and then we coach some of the younger crowd too, who are in college, who are 18 and above. We don't coach anybody below 18.
What is your biggest takeaway that a client has taught you?
Ooh, there's a lot. I got a lot of cool stories. That's what we were talking about with content. I'm trying to showcase more of that. But I think there's been a bunch, like I went through the big workload too. So I think understanding workload for other people. So kind of like what they go through and having like empathy with that. That's one of our big core values, having empathy with our clients. So that's a big one. I think them being more like them getting comfortable and being more vulnerable with like difficult times has been helpful as well, like to learning more about our clients and what they've been able to teach us. So for example, like we've had several people call us or call me at 11 p.m. and they're like, hey man, I'm 8 weeks out and I just broke up with my girlfriend, right? Or other clients talking about marriage struggles or things like that. And so I think if you sum it up, the biggest takeaway is everybody's like human and understanding that this is not just a prep. Like at the end of the day, like the prep's great. You should be totally locked in. The fat loss is great, right? But there's other aspects in life too that we got to understand that make us human that, we have to help them through.
Pretty wise words for a 23-year-old.
I try to be.
That's awesome, dude. Because you're 100% right. It's a hobby. It's a sport.
It is. Yeah.
Yes, it's a lifestyle. But at the same time, like if you're not enjoying the journey, then like why are you doing it?
Yeah.
If it's just for a trophy, that's tough. That's really tough because it's not easy. I mean, I find it to be probably the most disciplined, hardest thing to do. And I think there comes a point to where some people have the ability to flip the switch, right? Where it's just like, no, I don't crave anything else. It's just what I want to eat,
Yeah.
and just go through it. And I think others that haven't grasped that concept, they struggle a lot. And I often find that the more you have your life together, easier competing is. Because when your personal life is, let's just say, in shambles, the last thing you want to do is be disciplined on something. You want to rebel to some degree. You want to get off of this. You want to escape. You want to go. You want to find whatever excuse it is and have your self pity go into it. But I find that if you can focus, you can tunnel that energy and develop what it is you're trying to build, and it teaches you the most life lessons. I got so much from competing, and I don't feel like I would be where I'm at today if I didn't take that journey. And I mean that in a personal life. I mean that in business, whenever success, those two pieces bring to my life. I feel like competing did so much for me in so many ways. I also know that there's negatives that come with competing as well, right? Because it's not the healthiest thing in the world. Um, it's not necessarily the best thing for your gut, to eat the same foods over and over for so long. And when I mean competing, like I still eat at Rubbermaid containers, right? Which means like if I go have a piece of cake, it destroys me.
Yeah.
But it's like being able to find that balance of be able to stay on it. So I did 75 hard last year, which is actually the longest time frame I ever had without a cheat meal. Because even with competing, I would mix in cheat meals here and there based on when I would need them, right? Or just abundance of food. Or however you want to word it, an excuse to eat something off plan, right?
Yeah.
Versus just like, hey, eat more rice today. I'd be like, we could like do a burger and fries, right? I mean, technically, yeah. All right, let's do that.
Yeah.
But having to like not get off that plan, that was actually harder to me than competing was, because 75-day stretch with nothing but like very specific, like following a diet. It wasn't restrictive. Yes. Caloric deficit. No. I found that it was more mentally tough to stay on a consistent plan than it was to calorie restrict. And I know that's two different pieces, right? One's more of a physical and one's more of a mental. But in
Right.
your eyes, in competing, what's more difficult in your opinion, the physical or the mental?
Oh, the mental, 100%. That's an easy answer. So, I think physical wise, like at least for me, like I'm a very big like pain is temporary person,
Mm,
and I've also never quit on anything. I think that's what really set me
attaboy.
up competing and business too. So it's like with that you can get past the being hungry.
Mhm,
You can get past of, oh man, I do not want to go train today. I'm tired, because you get to the end of it and sometimes you don't even want to get out of bed, right?
mhm,
Um, but the mental, I think, really gets you to you when you are actually extremely hungry for like days and days and weeks on end. That I think that messes with your brain a little bit, to be honest with you. So, getting past that and being able to realize, like you said, this is a choice. I chose to do this. It shouldn't affect anybody else.
mhm,
That is difficult in itself, as well as the mental of missing out on a lot of stuff,
mm,
especially for, you did it when you were young too. So I mean, so did I, right? So I think for that crowd as well, it can be pretty difficult. I mean, even if you have kids, right?
mhm.
Missing out on certain things that you'd want to do with your kids, I think, can be pretty mentally challenging. So, like you said, it's a choice. You got to get past it, and if you want to look good, you got to work for it.
Yeah, I evolved throughout the years of competing to where it was like, hey, you want to go to the mall? I'm like, you mean walk around and do cardio? No, I'm not interested. And then as I get older, I'm like, hey, like my significant other wants to go do something. It's not their problem. Let's go do that thing. And I'll just have to suck that up as, hey, this is a choice. don't bring everybody else's world down. And
Mm-hmm.
so you learn to adapt, and you start to be like, I can do these things and be okay, versus just completely secluding yourself. Because I find that when you seclude and run away from all the life things that are happening, you miss out on the experiences. But at the same time, um, it's actually not making you any better, because you're not learning how to say no. You're not learning how to say yes. You're not learning how to have life hit you and you make a decision versus, well, if I just get away from having to make decisions, then it becomes easy. Well, that is true. But when life, punches you in the mouth, how do you adjust? How do you adapt? And so I think that's something we also learn in time too. You've had a lot of competitors obviously compete more than once, right?
Yeah.
Do you think that the first show is the hardest?
Depends on the person. Like I just made a story the other day where the guy's first show was a cakewalk and his third show was the hardest one. So I think I can't really categorize that. It depends on the person, but I would say typically yes.
I was definitely my hungriest on the first show because it was a new experience.
Yeah, you know what to expect going into it the second time. I think it depends on how tough that first one is. If it's like normal, which is
Yeah.
where it's tough, then yeah, the first one's the hardest. But if it's easy, then I mean, it's probably not gonna be that bad. I have a guy compete tomorrow, and I mean, you'll understand this, right? Where he's eating and his depletion, his lowest carb day ever, his whole prep and his peak week, is 345 carbs. Isn't that's hilarious, right? Because he
That's
walks like
nuts.
30,000 steps a day with his job. He's had to do
Mm.
like no cardio. He looks one of the most conditioned guys I've ever seen. I'm asking him, "How do you feel?" And he's like, "Oh, I feel fine." He's chilling, you know. His prep was like 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I was like 240 pounds eating 340 carbs in the off season.
yeah, yeah.
um, how many people do you work with general weight loss?
General weight loss. I don't know the number off the top of my head. I would assume probably around 50 on the team.
Okay.
Me directly, probably closer to 10 or so.
Okay.
10, 20, around there.
What do you think the number one mental barrier is keeping people from seeing results?
Um, I think it's not understanding that it is a process. It's going to take time. Like you're not going to wake up tomorrow and be at your goal. And a lot of, especially with social media nowadays, a lot of general weight loss will look at that and be like, "Oh, I really want to look like this guy. I want this body." And I'm like, "Okay, well, a couple of things." He's like, "He achieved this in 2 years." He's like, "I've been training for this long. Why don't I look like that?" I'm like, "Well, first of all, I haven't been with you that time, so I don't know." Second of all, you don't know what he went through to achieve that, no matter what he posts on social media, right? Like you don't live his life. Um, and third of all, like, I mean, that guy could have crazy genetics, and like you may not naturally have that. You have to work harder to achieve that. And so it's not seeing that is going to take a long time, essentially.
I found that in the elite level of competing, because I've worked with on a business level a lot of pros. Um, they all work hard. It's not the best one on stage is the one that worked the hardest. I just don't believe that, because I know all those guys. They all work their ass off to get to where they're at day in and day out of the gym. I find that when you get to a certain level in the elite level, and I might get some flack for this, I think the best competitors are the ones that can stay healthiest the longest. Injury is
Yeah, I
what
agree. I think in
prevents your
any
body
sport,
from continuing to push forward. Obviously, I'm going to take genetics as the number one factor, but I know, like for myself, and it was every 3 weeks I would tweak this, hurt that, pull this, do that. I'm like, as soon as I creeped above like 245, 250, it was just like something's always like tweaking, pulling, and I feel like those that can continue to push forward and stay injury free. And I think that really boils down to a genetic code of like how strong are your tendons and like just naturally what you're born with to be able to hold that together. How big in your opinion, does genetics play into bodybuilding or fitness as a whole?
Massively.
Now, I think we both can agree very clear genetics are not an excuse
No,
for somebody not to put in the work. But
no.
when we
My
talk muscle fullness or muscle roundness, muscle bellies, shape, structure, sweeps, tie-ins, like
yeah,
recovery, right? Like growth in general. I don't
right.
care what you do, what you eat, what you take. If you're just not born that way, you can't make it that way.
hmm I think genetic wise, it plays a massive factor. My assistant coach says this, and he always says, "Your genetics don't suck, you suck." And a lot of people can take that the wrong way, but at the end of the day, it's you. When you are training, a lot of people don't essentially know how to train hard, right? And that's something that especially he preaches a lot. And once you kind of learn that, you, even with your genetics, you can still set yourself apart from the average competitor and become an elite competitor. And also to touch on what you said earlier, you said some of the best athletes are the guys who can stay healthy. I mean, you used to play baseball like Cal Ripken, right? Cal Ripken never missed a game for, I don't know the number off the top of my head, but he has like the all-time record for it, and he's one of the greatest players of all time because he was able to continue to show up over and over and over again. So same thing with any sport. I mean, even with a job, right? Like if you continue to show up and you continue to stay healthy and stay in that mindset of that grind, then you're going to do extremely well. They even in business they say this with people who are ultra successful. They say there's guys who got started, and when you start something new, you got like this massive passion for it, and you go through kind of waves and spurts of how motivated you are to get stuff done. And the guys who never take their foot off the gas are the guys who end up being ultra successful, whether it's sports, whether it's business, relationship building, like whatever, networking, whatever it may be.
I think your camera went off. If you wanted to tar and put that back on.
No, it overheated. It's cool. Yeah.
All right. We'll cut that piece out. I just want to double check for yourself there.
Yeah. It's hot. I'll let it rest.
All right. Um, okay. So what does the next 2 to 3 years look like for you, right? You're a young guy. You got a great business. You build something massive. I mean, you're leaps and bounds where I was 10 years ago. What does the next few years look like for you?
A few years, I think with personal wise, I would like to have a home, like get out of the apartment living, have a home, settle down somewhere. Kind of where I'm at in life right now is build this massive empire with a business and also continue to travel. That's something that I'm really finding out I love, and explore a lot. I think I really got a passion for that in Singapore, and it's kind of coming back. So
Yeah.
over
I
the
see
next
the
few years,
world map behind you. So,
yeah, exactly. So over the next few years, travel a little bit, find somewhere where I'd like to settle. In regards to business wise and what we want to do with Ascend, it's like the vision is create a brand of coaching that when people think about fitness coaching, they think about Ascend. Now, I don't know if that's going to happen in the next 3 years. I honestly don't believe that can happen in 3 years. Possibly. I think it's going to take a lot longer to build. I think that could be a 10-year plan. But like when you think of dry fit, you think of Nike. When you think of electric cars, you think of Tesla. When you think of a phone, you think of Apple, right? So that's the vision I have for it. When you think about fitness coaching, you think about Ascend. And we don't want to just do bodybuilding coaching either. We want to do bodybuilding. We want to do, lifestyle, general weight loss. We want to do a big part that we want to get into eventually is sports performance. So we want to find qualified coaches who we can find a coach who is excellent in basketball training, right? Or somebody who's a top CSCS and get them on the team, right? People who can train other athletes in all different sports, not just bodybuilding. So that's kind of where we want to bring it. But over the next 3 years to get there, it's finding the right people, traveling, networking, meeting people that can help us get there, and you know, building that out over time.
Dude, you have a very unique mindset for somebody of your age. Where'd that come from? Like who put these grand thoughts and capabilities into your mind?
I don't know, man. To be honest with you, I think very like free spirited kind of person. That's kind of always how I've been. So when I was, I don't know, like when I was in college, I started out wanting to be a physical therapist because I wanted to stay around sports. Now, getting into college, it was just like I'm gonna go to college because so I can play baseball and I want to keep playing, and I'm just gonna make sure I play a lot, which I did. And after that, when I was like, all right, I gotta start thinking about a career, then I got into coaching when I was 19, and everything kind of naturally evolved for me. I finally got to a point when I met you where I was like, okay, now I got to start making stuff happen for myself. Um, like the natural growth eventually only gets you so far. So once I started understanding what coaching was and kind of like, okay, this can become a job for me, this can become a career. I found out that I wanted to be free in life. Like I realized that I didn't really want to work for somebody else when I kind of got into it. I did that for a little bit right out of college, and it was a pretty bad experience with that.
Mm.
Um, and I think like that's a whole crazy story in itself. Like right when I got out of college, I worked for somebody a little bit, and it didn't work out well, and that really set me to, okay, I got to make something for myself. And then that shifted into, this is the life that I want to live, and I'm going to obtain as much knowledge to get there. And then when I don't know, I'll find people that can help me do that as well. I think a big part of it too is relationship wise. So um, with where I want to go in life too, like I want to bring my significant other with me along that,
Mm.
and building the life that essentially that my parents were able to provide for me, I want to do for my kids is like a big part. And so with how I want to live my life, like no one's going to do it for me. So I got to work every day to make it happen.
As an ex athlete, I like to ask this question randomly to people. Are you a guy that loves to win or hates to lose?
That's a good one. um, I think it's love to win. And here's why. Because it's inevitable that you're going to lose. Like failure is inevitable. So if you say that you hate to lose, right? Um, then you're kind of afraid of failure. And I've had a lot. I'm sure you've had a lot too, in business, and relationship, and fitness, right? Everything that you've probably done, you've probably had some failures. And at the end of the day, you gotta look back at it and go, all right, well, better not do that again, And you find out a pathway to become better, and figure it out and figure out how to go after that. I think that's the fun part about the journey. It's a big influence for me now, I think, in business is Hormozy, right? Probably for everybody, especially kids around my age. And he says a lot, that everything's a game. Like the whole business thing it's a game. And if you look at it like that, then you can see it as, all right, I'm going to fail sometimes in the game. I think baseball taught me that. So learn from the failures, pick yourself up, and learn how to turn those failures and those losses into a win.
I have to agree. I always make the statement that if I focus on not losing, then if I don't lose and I won, then it's a success, which is really neutral. If I
Right.
focus on winning, then I lose, then I now go back down to neutral. But if I won, it's a win. So it's like I get to choose, like, if I lose, is it neutral or does it ruin my day? And I think a
Right.
prime example for somebody, if you're not sure and you watch football on TV and your team loses, are you throwing and cussing? Because that means that you hate to lose and you're not even involved in the thing. But if you're like lose, you'll be like, all right, when's the next one? All right, I'll see you guys next Sunday. Or if you win, it's like, yo, that was great. I'm gonna see you guys next Sunday. But if it ruins your day, then it's like, man, that little thing that you had no control over controls your attitude, then what else in life, when something really happens, how's that going to affect you?
Right. And I think if you look at the overall game, like if you look at the overall game of life, like if life's a game, you eventually want to win it, right? So you're going to have small wins along the way, but that overall win may be somebody different for everybody else. For some person, it may be, okay, my overall win is I'm going to make $100 million. Great. Other person could be, okay, I'm going to marry the woman of my dreams or the man of my dreams. Great, right? I mean, that could depend on, or, I'm going to become a pro bodybuilder, right? Or pro athlete, right? So getting to that point, whatever it may be, you're going to have like those losses along the way. You're going to lose a lot of money at one point, right? You're going to have a business decision that backfires terribly. You're going to spend a lot of time dating the wrong person, right? Or even if you had a previous poor marriage, right? You're going to spend time, failing a lot in the sport that you want to compete and become a pro. So, I mean, if you set that overall mindset of like, okay, eventually I'll get there. How do I make that happen? And when you learn, when you have a loss and you don't know why you lost, then that's when things get interesting. Because you got to learn, you got to figure it out.
When you do fail at something, what's your natural reaction?
I think the first reaction is like, oh no. And then right after that, it's okay. How do we fix this? So I think a big thing that hit me recently was we were doing great in business. Thankfully, I had met you through that, and we essentially needed to scale. And so, as a business owner, I think it was a good and bad decision. I hired like 5 people in 1 week, and it ended up making my workload a lot more
Yeah.
that week.
Yeah.
So it was great though, because it ended up turning out great. Well, the problem that we ended up running into a couple months later was this is my first time that I had to train a lot of people.
Yeah.
And you got to understand as an owner, no matter who you bring onto your team, even if they have a great mindset, they're never going to have the mindset that you do. And so you got to train them to have that, right? Or something close to that.
Mm-hmm.
And so when they would mess up and it would affect the business or whatever, or it would reflect bad on me or the brand, um, the initial reaction would be like, well, what are they doing? Right. But then you really got to sit back and think about it before you approach that person and go, okay, it's my fault because I should train them better. And then you figure out how to do that. So now it's like learning a lot about leadership and kind of shifting from a founder to a CEO.
Right. And I think that's a lot. Like, I think one word summed that up, and it's ownership. How do you
Yeah.
get somebody that's a client or somebody that's trying to make a change in their life? How do you get them to take ownership of their choices?
So like if they're not following their plan, then you explicitly like kind of have to say it, to be honest with you. So, because I'm not going to have somebody not follow their plan and then come back around and say, oh, when are we going to change something? Right. Like, why am I not losing this weight? It's like, what, I mean, why do you think you're not losing the weight? Like you're not following the plan. And so it's understanding the person on how to convey that to them. So there's different styles of coaching. This is something we learned in college, right? Where you can have more of an aggressive style or more collaborative style, or you could have, I don't remember the styles off the top of my head, or you could have, a style where you kind of like, talk to them like very nicely. And so it's understanding that person, how they respond to different styles of coaching. You could experiment, you could try it out, and it may backfire. But I think it's just getting to develop that relationship with the person over time. Like that's another big thing is that we have is like relationship building, right?
Yeah.
So building that relationship with somebody, and then you'll know how to approach them.
Are
That
you
way.
somebody that needs more of the coaching or tough love?
I think for me, it's coaching because I like to learn.
Mm.
So, I mean, that's relative, right? It depends on how you
Mm-hmm.
want to talk about how coaching is. I'm not the person, like, I don't want you to tell me, like, it's okay. Like, don't worry about it. Cause I'm just going to, like, honestly, I'm just going to let it go in one ear out the other because I don't care. Right. If I mess up, like, I want to learn why it happened.
Mm.
Usually you can figure it out. But if I can't, then I want that coach to coach me through it and teach me how it happened. So I had coaches for my last show. The amount of questions I asked those guys every time they gave me an update was absurd. But they understood that. And I told them that from the get go, right?
Yeah.
And I have clients like that too who want to do. They sign up and they're like, I want to do what you do. I say, great, cool. I'll teach you everything I need to know. If I ever don't explain it well enough, let me know.
I think the biggest thing understanding there in that statement is understanding the why versus the what.
Yeah,
I think a lot of times people just tell me what to do. And it's like, I don't need to tell you what to do. I need to tell you why you're doing it so that you can make the correct choice, because you don't need a coach when life's easy. You need a coach when life happens, because when life happens, it's not about the what, it's about the why, so that you can make the best educated decision with the circumstances in front of you.
right.
So I think understanding the why is massive. And I feel like whether that's relationship, whether that's fitness, whether that's business, like you need to know why things are happening and why you need to make adjustments or what adjustments to make versus just what it is you need to do. Because that doesn't teach you.
Exactly.
What do you want people to take away from you?
I think at the end of the day, it's that I just genuinely want to help you. Right. So also at the end of the day, like it's a business, right? This is what puts food on the table for me, right? And for the employees and people that are in the brand. But even with that, like there's a lot of people, not just with coaching, but kind of in any industry who get into it for the money. And while that's great, that wasn't ever a driving factor for me when I started. And I don't think it ever will be, right? I think if you do good things will come. And a big focus that we have is brand. Um, what's his name? Andy Frisella talks about this a lot, right? Where if you want to build a good brand and you want people to have a lasting impact on people, it all boils down to just being a good person,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if you build relationships with people that you help, if you have empathy through them or for them when they go through like difficult times, difficult struggles, that's going to have a much bigger impact on them in the long run. Of I had somebody who didn't just help me lose weight, didn't just help me get ready for a show, but became a true friend of mine that I can come to whenever I need help. Is going to, I mean, bodybuilding or doing or losing weight is it's healthy. I mean, it can't bodybuilding's healthy at some points, but it's a hobby at the end of the day, right? So if you can have somebody who's going to help you in other aspects of life, that's the impact that I want to have on people.
I dig that, man, because I feel like with coaching, and I don't care what type of coaching it is, sometimes the only thing a person needs is somebody that believes in them. Because oftentimes, as high achievers, we might not believe in ourselves as much. And so, having that person in your corner to support you, push you through, you're able to achieve things that you thought maybe you weren't ever possible of doing until you're able to build that evidence bank of things that you've accomplished in life. And I think oftentimes when somebody's 40 pounds overweight, they've never accomplished anything in the fitness or health side of things. So they think, well, I have no evidence that I can do it. So why would I believe that I can do it? And that support from that coach, that friend, that workout partner allows you to finally start to get some momentum and believe that I can achieve, I can do, I am capable of achieving this thing.
Exactly.
Dude, man, I appreciate you having me on here, man. You are wise beyond your ears, brother. And it's always nice to connect with, I don't want to say younger generation, but I am, because I feel like, man, the time I was 23 to where I'm at now at 34, dude, so much has transpired and changed. And I'm very, very excited to the future you have ahead of you and the impact that you're going to have on people's lives. I don't think that you might not see it that way, even though I think you might also at the same time. Because I remember when I was 23, dude, the farthest thing from my mind was impact. And I
Yeah.
feel like it's the number one driver inside yourself, your clients, and your business, dude. So I'm super excited for you.
Yeah. No, dude, thanks for having me on. Even like likewise with you too. Like you're working with a ton of people right now, and you're making tremendous impacts, not just on mentoring them to help them up in other areas, but essentially like really teaching them how to scale and grow in business, mental, mindset, all of it. So you're doing a great job.
Thank
Love
you,
being
brother.
on.
Where can
And
people find you?
you can find me on Instagram, Adrian Stover 22. You can find our coaching at Ascend Coaching _ on Instagram. And you can also find me on TikTok as well at Adrian Stover 22.
The man's got some great content, some great storytelling. Highly suggest go give him a follow and watching the journey. Big things to come, I can promise you.
Yeah, absolutely. Have a good one, Mike.
Thanks, brother.
My biggest takeaway podcast.